Hey everyone, this is Zach, and today I wanted to talk about something that I think should be thought of more when it comes to the newest Pokemon games coming out, Pokemon Scarlet and Pokemon Violet. And this was a question I thought up when I was talking about whether Frostbite and Drowsy were going to come to these new games. And it seems like from the one trailer we had where it showed a little bit about the Terror Raids, that Drowsy was going to be in, and so we can probably infer from there that Frostbite's going to be in. Now, this is not what I want to talk about today, but weirdly they balance out all the statuses. They're all more balanced now. Really weird. But I thought to myself, what else might change? What changes from Pokemon Legends Arceus may come over to Scarlet and Violet? And one thing that I noticed when doing my top 5 dislikes and wants for features from Legends Arceus to come over to Scarlet and Violet, one of the things I wanted was Frostbite, one of the things I didn't want was Drowsy. But one thing I did notice is right here. In Pokemon's Legends Arceus, Stab only increased a move's damage by 1.25. Now, this is different from regular mainline series games where it is 1.5. For those of you who don't know, what Stab is same type attack bonus. Same type attack bonus, or Stab, is when a Pokemon gets a bonus using a move that matches one of its types. So, for example, if Fuecoco uses Ember, it should get a 1.5 base power boost to that move. Now, today I want to talk about what if they change it so Stab only does 1.25. This really shouldn't be that big of a deal, but it is going to decrease overall damage, which would make the game slightly more defensive and more about board position, which I think is a good change, but I don't know if doing that with a Stab decrease is the best way to go about it. And the other thing is it's really different, especially when they're adding on a feature that's going to not only change Pokemon's typing and then changing the Stab, but also gives some Pokemon a boost. Now, what am I talking about? Here on the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's page that came out on August 3rd about terrestrialization, it says right down here that you can terrestrialize a Pokemon once per battle and the transformation will last until the battle ends. When a terrestrialized Pokemon uses a move that matches its Terror type and at least one of its original types, the boost to that move's power will be even greater. So what we were speculating here is that if, say, that Fuecoco uses Ember, that 1.5 Stab boost turns into a 3 times Stab boost, basically doubling the amount of Stab that you would get. And what I'm worried about is if Stab changes from that 1.5 to that 1.25, which would turn terrestrialization Stab from times 3 to times 2.5. So let's take a look at some things that could change. Let's just move my camera down real quick. Okay, so here this was a spread that I was working on for my Spike Myth Cup team for Milotic. I basically wanted to EV my Milotic so it survives a grassy glide 100% of the time, which I did that. It does 81.1 to 96% damage, so it's always going to live. That is Rillaboom with the normal 1.25 Stab. So it was kind of hard to figure this out because I couldn't think of an item that gives an exactly 1.25% boost. But you can see right here, if I change this Rillaboom to our normal type, basically taking away the Stab, it only does 54.4 to 64.3, which is a big difference, but we don't have to worry about that because stab is still going to be around. So what I wanted to do is I compared it between the damages of a normal type Rillaboom with Life Orb and a normal type Rillaboom with Miracle Seed. Miracle Seed gives a 20% boost, while Life Orb does a 0.3, 30% boost. So if you take the math on those and and find the middle and average it out, you can find what a 1.25% damage would do. So if I take the Assault Vest on this normal type Rillaboom and change it to Life Orb, you see that even a normal type Rillaboom with a Life Orb is not hitting the same damage amounts as a grass type Rillaboom with just stab. So that already tells me that the difference between the stab that it is now and a stab at 1.25 is a big difference. Basically, to get the knockout or to even get similar damage to what stab is now, you would have to terrestrialize Rillaboom. And this damage here, this is with Life Orb, which is 1.3, but the stab that I'm worried about is 1.25. So that damage would be between 67.5 and 79.9%. Still not hitting what the original stab is. Now, where am I going with this? Basically just a conversation piece. Just talking about what I think about this, and I want to know from you what this might mean for the metagame if it changes. Do you think that they would bring stab down to 1.25 in these games like they did in Pokémon Legends Arceus, or do you think they would just keep it at 1.5 like it's always been? They made the change in Pokémon Legends Arceus as well as the status with Drowsy and Frostbite, so why not bring over other changes? I don't think we'll see the different styles that we saw in Pokémon Legends Arceus, because that was kind of like the battle gimmick that we see for each game. But Willow here, this was a tweet that went around from Willow. She calculated what the damage amounts would be, what the base power amounts would be, based on stab being 1.5 and stab being 3 being the terrestrialize boost that we are estimating. Now they also figured it out with Life Orb and with +1. I didn't want to do that, but what I did do, and we'll move the camera back, what I did do is take a look at what the difference in base power would be if the stab was decreased. So here we see a base power move of 25, where stab it would be 37.5, and the terrestrialize at ×3 would be 75. Also, can you think of a water type Urshifu critting a Surging Strikes at a base power of 75? That is nuts. But if we look at the difference here, the stab of 1.25 would bring it down, about 6 points. Not really that big of a deal, but how many competitive moves are in that 25 base range? And the difference between a ×3 Terra type boost between a ×2.5 Terra boost is 12.5 points, which is actually like a decent amount. But if you look at the 60 to 120 range, this is where most competitive moves land on power level, between, I'd have to say, 60 and 125. There are some moves that are more powerful. There are definitely some moves that are used that are below that 60, but generally speaking, most moves are going to be in that base power of 60 to 120 range. So if we look at the 60 with a 1.5 stab, it does 90 base power. but with a 1.25 stab, it does 75 base power. Now, what we are assuming the terrestrialization is giving an extra stab, or a ×3 boost, that goes from 90 to 180. But if you look at the difference of times 2.5, which would be the change stab, the 1.25 stab, and I feel like I'm just blurring out numbers and rambling. I am rambling. Back to rambling. If you look at it between what we think Terra boost would be versus what it could be if they decrease stab, it's a 30 base power difference, which isn't too bad if you're hitting super effective. If you're getting that 1.25 boost, still really good damage, especially off of a base 60 move. You're still doubling your damage. But when we go down to the 120, so think of the Flare Blitz, the close combats, 1.5 times boost would be 180, where 1.25 boost would be 150. That's a 30-point difference, and that's before terrestrialization. The difference in terrestrialization, if they change stab, would be 60 base power, which is a lot. Hey everyone, I'm editing, and one thing I wanted to bring up is that if the reason why I think this is a big deal is you only get this Terra boost if you are terrestrializing into a type your Pokemon already has. Now, one of the things that a lot of people have talked about is that how changing your type could have a lot of defensive means to it, where you could, terrestrialize Landorus to be a ice type, so it didn't take ×4 damage to ice. You could terrestrialize Shedinja to be a electric type with an air balloon to basically make it untouchable. There's been a lot of things where people have talked about this being more of a defensive measure rather than an offensive one, which we talked about Dynamax being that way at the very beginning, where a lot of people are like, oh, I could Dynamax my Ferrothorn and, double its health for 3 turns, which no one really did that after a certain amount of time in the metagame. It was not worth wasting your Dynamax to play defensively unless it was a game-winning move. So what I'm talking about here is if you change to a type that isn't one of your original 2 types, you could potentially only get this 1.5 or 1.25 boost. So when you're looking at the difference of changing to a type where you're only going to get a 1.25 versus like getting a 2.5, it kind of, when you look at the differences, even with the 1.5 to the 1.3, this still looks like a very offensive focused gimmick. So you have to ask yourself, if my stab's going down to 1.25, if I'm changing to a type, if I'm changing my Pokemon to a type that is different than one of its 2 base types, 1 or 2 base types, it has to be for a really good defensive reason. It has to be for a game-changing reason. And if they call that Terra type and adjust for it, or make a play or make a call or read against it, it kind of stinks. We'll go to the base 80. Base 80 base power move. If I change to a different type, my stab will be 100. But if I change to a type I already have, my stab will be 200 or even 240. When we look at that, you kind of have to ask yourself, how many defensive plays are really going to be worth it? And if the stab is even less than it was in previous games, you're going to have more reasons to change to a type that you didn't already have to be defensive. Remember, this isn't like Dynamax where the moves will give you a boost and you could counterplay with certain boost. This is just changing your stab and changing your typing. So you need to have a lot of defensive reasons to terastallize to a type that you don't have versus to a type that you already do have, because the boost is just so great compared to just changing a type. So there has to be a lot of defensive reasons to get to make that call. But I don't know. Anyways, what do you think about this? Do you think that they will change the stab to make the game more defensive and maybe curve the power level that terastallization will bring? Or do you think I'm just overthinking the whole process? How would this change the competitive game? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you want to see more content like this, let me know, because I would love to talk about how I think, as much as I don't want Drowsy, I think the new statuses like Frostbite really make like all status conditions pretty balanced, weirdly balanced. But that's going to be all. Give me some feedback in the comments down below. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you made it this far in the video, I want to say thanks for watching. Once again, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if we find out more information on this, I'll let you know. Until then, I'm Zach, and we'll see everyone later.